I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings, Arnold.
There's always a pecking order. The little packers never mess with the big packers. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
All right, welcome back to the Bodybuilding Legends Podcast. I have a very special guest with us this week, Mr. John DeCola, 1969 IFBB Mr. America winner. And John, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here. Thank you.
All right, John. Well, we normally start, John, from the beginning. So how did you get started in weight training? What age were you, and what was your interest in that?
I was just about 20. I graduated from high school, and I was looking, missed the sports, playing sports, and little health club opened up. I lived in Framingham, Massachusetts, and a little club in Natick, Massachusetts opened up, and Ted Van Dyne Health Studio. I went over and joined, and the guy that was measuring me up, Alan Keene, he had won Junior Mr. America for IFBB.
Yeah, I remember his name, yeah.
Yeah, but that time he was in the AAU, and he was training for a contest. I never heard of a contest. I didn't know what a contest was. So he was measuring up, and he says, "How long you been working out?" And I says, "I haven't worked out." Because when we were in high school, the coaches wouldn't let us. Right.
Yeah, weight training was frowned upon, right?
So he said, "Well, why don't you come with me?" He says, just train. It's 2 months from now." And he says, see what kind of development you can do. Well, we went in the contest. It was in the YMCA in Boston. And actually, it's listed as Mr. Ironman, but it was Mr. Athlete. Mr. Ironman came a couple of months later. And I ended up winning. And Len Boslin, you know Len.
Oh, yeah, the guy who used to be the MC, yeah.
Yeah. He came in second.
Wow.
And Alan came in third, and that started the whole thing. It gave me the incentive to keep on training, working out. And I worked out for the health benefits. I was more interested in being healthy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that was sort of a side thing, one of the. It felt good. The pump is nothing like the pump. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started. And then a couple of years later, that was 1960. In 1961, I won the Mr. Massachusetts, most muscular.
Okay.
Then I went into win Mr. New England, Junior Mr. New England, most muscular, etc. And that's where it started.
What sports did you play, John, when you were in high school?
Football, baseball.
Okay. So you just had pretty much a naturally muscular physique then, huh?
Well, in school, I weighed 155, 160, 155 playing football, and then graduated 160. So I was in that health club at 160 and went up to 170.
Okay.
Just natural progression, from working out.
Yeah.
And I have a very high metabolism, and I have to eat. I have low blood sugar. I have to eat all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was I was eating everything under the sun. And, I was just lucky with the metabolism.
Yeah.
For bodybuilding.
So after you did that first contest, did you start to realize that, there's Mr. America contest, Mr. Universe, and did you start to develop an idea of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, because I was starting to read the magazines, Strength and Health and Ironman. And initially, I had seen a picture of Grimmick. He was in Santa Monica. I guess he was for the Mr. USA contest in 1949. And he was sitting signing autographs, and he had a short sleeve shirt on. And I said, "Oh my God, that's who I want to look like." And I started reading about Grimmick. Mm-hmm. And that's what inspired me. And then meeting, John, the camaraderie back then. I don't know how it is today, but it was fabulous back then.
Yeah.
And we didn't know anything the West Coast and the East Coast, New York City and the West Coast and Florida. But on the outskirts, we didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
Unless what we picked up in the magazine. I mean, here we are taking Hoffman protein. It was horrible.
Right.
And then in that book, Mr. What was it? Muscletown, USA. Yeah, Fair. He describes the bin that they were making the protein in, and they had the weight loss and the weight gain and the protein all come from the same bin. So it was all the same.
Right.
And later on, I found out I was allergic to, and I was eating a lot. I was eating dairy, everything. And I got my weight up at different times at 200, 215.
Okay.
But I was smooth, you know.
Yeah.
And I did, I got to a 400-pound bench press, and then I said to myself, well, what am I doing? What am I going to go to 425 and 450? I said, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm just going to do pumping.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't do any Olympic lifting because I had a bad back.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I had a bad back right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, I just concentrated on bodybuilding.
Okay.
And again, what I get back to is the guys that, you know, you meet throughout the years and all the famous bodybuilders I met. There were very few bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were good guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you interviewed John Taylor.
Yeah. Yeah.
He came to my club. What happened is I went to work for that health studio, and then a couple of years later, he was a pioneer, and it just didn't take at that time. And so he closed up, and then I went to work for a friend of mine that became a friend of mine, Joe Cedrone, and he opened several clubs over a period of time. And I ended up managing a couple of his clubs, and then opened my own in my hometown.
Okay.
And it was called DeCola's Key to Health.
Okay.
Everybody got a key. You know, it was $48 down, $10 a month. That's back in the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's almost like Planet Fitness now. You know, it's $10.
Right. One thing I wanted to ask you about, John, right off the bat. First of all, what year were you born?
June 24th, 1939.
39. Okay. Wow. Okay.
I was Joe Bender was July 4th, 1939. So I'm like a few weeks older than Joe Bender.
Oh, kid, man, you look great. So how old are you now? 80, 81, 82?
81. I'll be 82 in June.
Wow, you look fantastic.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And one thing John Taylor told me when I interviewed him was he said you were a natural bodybuilder. You never used steroids.
Yeah, well, my system is so delicate. When I say delicate, I couldn't even drink. It took me 10 years to be able to drink a cup of coffee.
Wow.
I shake. And I'd have to be very careful what I take into my system. And when I was training for the 68 Mr. America, I had gone down to Florida to finish up training the last 2 weeks. And Frank Zane lived there. And I met all the bodybuilders down there, and Zane, and he was surprised I was going to enter the Weider show because I was always the AAU guy, you know.
Yeah.
And David and Goliath, you remember that name, those names? David and Goliath.
Hand balancing act, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, that Jerry, I don't know if it was Jerry Howard, but he had a gym across the street from Miami Beach. And that's where I worked out, and I stayed at one of the hotels. He said, John, come here, take this. This will maybe put on a couple of pounds. And I didn't know what it was. And I saw the bottle, it was Seba. So now I know it was Dianabol.
Yeah.
So I took, for 3 days, I took one each day.
Okay.
I broke out with a boil in my inner thigh.
Oh, wow.
Became infected, could not work legs, had to go to the doctor, the emergency room, and they put a shot right into it. And I was suffering, and I went to the contest suffering with that. And that, oh man, that I said I would never touch that stuff. Now, whether that could have been, maybe it was an ingrown hair, I don't know.
Yeah.
Could have been an ingrown hair from shaving, but it just, I just, like I said before, I got into it for the health reasons, and later on, I heard so many stories about guys that would abuse it, and so I didn't need it.
Yeah.
But John, what I was doing was eating 1.5 pounds lean meat a day.
Okay.
I'd boil it, and I'd paper towel it, get all the grease off, and then I put apple cider vinegar, some onions, and maybe some green beans or something like that, and that's what I lived on.
That's what you were eating all day. Yeah.
8 times a day. Little did I know that's where the creatine was coming from.
Right.
I was getting some creatine and not knowing. And there was a Friendly's in the shopping center next door, and those girls, they would frown on me because here comes that guy. This is one of the girls told me afterwards. He wants the big beef, and we got to pat it dry with paper towels. He's a pain in the ass. One of those girls became my sister-in-law eventually.
Oh, really? That's funny. So how did you guys train back then, John? When you started training, was it like full body workouts, or were you doing split routines back then? How were you doing it?
I was doing a split routine. I was doing like 2 body parts a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you going 6 days a week?
5 days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know what, John? We didn't do any cardio.
Right.
We did because we didn't know. But I only rested 10 seconds between sets.
Mm-hmm.
So consequently, through the years, when somebody worked out with me, it was almost I couldn't keep up with me because I was ready to go.
Wow.
You know? And I think I got my cardio that way.
Yeah, for sure.
That time.
Yeah. Was it kind of like the routines they're doing now, like maybe 3 exercises a body part, something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I didn't go 4, 5, 6. I did I did a warm up in 3 sets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And was the emphasis always on training heavier to get bigger?
I would go probably, John, every time I went to do max, I didn't feel good the next day.
Okay.
So if I went 80%,
okay.
I had a little extra,
Yeah.
I fared better. I fared out better.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
felt
Phil Pro used to always say that, leave a little bit in the tank when you're training.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I had my club, and I entered the IFBB. Well, prior to that, John, I won everything in New England. I was the first guy from New England to win a national contest.
Okay.
So I went to New York for the AAU Mr. America.
Okay.
And there I met Val Vasiloff.
Right.
You remember that name?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And when I walked in, I wore a suit, tie.
Uh-huh.
I walked in, Val turned around and he looked me up and down. And he said, "Oh, who's this guy?"
Right.
Well, I beat Val that contest. And then in the Junior Mr. America, the AAU, it was held at the World's Fair, and it was put on by Joe Bender, and I beat Val there.
Wow.
And only by 1 point.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
Where was the World's Fair? Where was that at?
New York.
In New York. Wow.
1964.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was held in the World's Fair, so they must have did they have a huge audience?
Oh yeah, it was one of the best shows, best produced shows I think I've ever been in.
Wow, no kidding.
It was beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
And they had Joe Ferraro, Joe from Buffalo, New York,
Mm-hmm.
Joe Lazaro. I'm trying to think of all the guys that there was some big names there that later on became big. And
so that contest probably got you some national recognition then, huh?
Yeah.
Winning that show. Yeah.
Yeah. And 3 weeks later, I was invited to Joe Bender's. I don't know if you heard about. He had a garage that Pearl and Tenorino and Sansone and a lot of the Joe Goldberg, they all worked out at one time.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So I stayed at Joe's with his mom and dad, and we worked out in the garage, and then flew to Chicago for the Mr. America. And Joe that morning came in and woke me up at the YMCA, and he said, "Look, John," he said, I don't know what's wrong, but you're not even going to place in the top 10. They didn't give you any athletic points."
Oh, because of the lifting, the Olympic lifting.
Yeah, but they gave it to me prior to that, to all the contests. You know, I had my records of school, shot put record, and I had, you know, my school records of playing ball. You know,
right.
Brought proof. And they said, "Well, your school's too small." So I protested. I ended up in 8th place. And the guy that should have won was a guy by the name of Sergio Oliva.
Right.
He weighed 195 pounds.
Okay.
He looked phenomenal. And I come in 8th, and I said, "Well, that's pretty good." I came in behind Oliva.
Right.
And I figured I should have come in the top 3. Val could have come in ahead of me. We were so close. But Sergio should have won.
And Val won that night. Val Vasily won.
Val won. And I congratulated him because, you know, we were all pretty close.
Yeah. So how did the athletic points work? I thought, so did you just have to do like the Olympic lifts, and then you had to provide the judges or the organizers with lifts? You didn't do it right there, right? You didn't do it at the show.
I brought the proof with me and gave it to the judges. I had copies of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they didn't make the guys lift in front of them to.
No.
You just had it was kind of an honor system where you brought it in and you showed how much you lifted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they took the 5 points away from me. Well, that's going to put me down.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. So they give me 3 points, and I was missing 2, so I ended up in 8th place.
Wow.
And Hoffman, there's another thing. You know Bob Hoffman. You know who he was. Okay. Yeah. In the Iron Game, we should know, right?
Right.
Know all those names: Perry Rader, Bob Hoffman.
Sure. Yeah.
I was invited to York in 1963 for a week to 10 days, and I went down and trained and got to know Grimmick and Steve Stanko, and then it was time to leave, and Hoffman was driving up to Schenectady, New York for the Mr. Atlantic Coast and weightlifting contest.
Okay.
So he says, "John," he said, I'll give you, come with me, and then I'll give you bus fare to go home from there. And I said, "Oh, that's fine." And he brought a lifter, and I forget his name, but he was a quiet, big guy, sat in the back. I sat in the front. And Hoffman said he's nonstop talker, you know. And you don't know if he's telling these accurate stories because there's nobody there to verify. But he's going on and on. And he says, "You know, I only eat once a day. That's at night, just once a day. I can go all day long." I says, "Oh, Bob, I have to eat." Well, we're going to drive. We're just going to drive. And he says, "Go in the pocket of my coat right there," he said. And I went in the pocket and took out a half-eaten Hoffman bar. He says, "I ate that in Japan." He says, "That thing's a month and a half old, still good. You can have that." I says, "Bob, I don't want this. I want to eat. You've got to stop so I can eat." Right. And I'm sure, I think the guy's name was Tom in the back. I said, "I'm sure Tom is hungry." And Tom's going like this. "Oh, God, I'm hungry." Hoffman goes in and pulls in, and we ate. And we get up to Schenectady, and I won that contest.
What was the name of the contest, John?
It's the Atlantic Coast.
Atlantic Coast, okay.
Coast, yeah. It was put on by the police chief up there at that time. I think his name was Peters.
Okay.
Chief Peters, Peterson. And then Bob gave me the money to take a bus home, and and that's what happened there. But I got to know Grimmick, and he was my hero, so I was happy.
Yeah. What was John Grimmick like?
Oh, geez, I had dinner at his house. I had his 5 kids and his wife, and she cooked a great meal. And he was just the nicest guy, to me anyway. He was just the nicest guy.
Yeah.
And he got mad. He was angry at that Mr. America contest. He never took part in the judging, but he was angry, John. He came to me and he said, "I'm disgusted." I said, "John, no." I said, "That's okay." I said, "That's okay. I'm still young, you know."
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't discourage me. Well, I didn't enter again for what? From 1964 to 1969, and I crossed over to IFBB.
Yeah.
Now, prior to that, John, because Alan Keene was going to these IFBB contests in New York. He was entering, so I'd go along. So after the contest, we'd always end up at Weider's table. There'd be 10 or 12 people at the table. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I got there, but I was always sitting at that table with Larry Scott and some of the big guys back then.
You guys would go out and eat afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got to know Weider, but not really well. And so I crossed over, and Zane had lost to Don Howorth in '67.
Right.
Okay. Howorth lost to Chet Yorton in '66.
Right.
Now, who's the guy to beat? Is Zane.
Yeah.
So Zane saw me there and he says, "No, you're not going to enter." I said, "Yeah." and so one of the judges came up and said, "John, you're ahead of Zane, prejudging."
No kidding.
But that night, Zane was flawless in his posing.
No
Absolutely fun. John, if I had won, I would have been embarrassed.
Really?
Because Zane brought the house down.
No kidding. Wow.
So he deserved to win.
Yeah.
So so he ended up winning, and I was happy. I said, this is next year.
Yeah. Hey, John, tell me a little bit about Frank Zane's physique, because the guys today, the younger guys today, they look at Frank Zane and they think he was way overrated. They think he was skinny and he shouldn't have won the titles he won. But you competed against him, and you can attest to how he looked. So what was your opinion of how Frank Zane looked back then? Symmetry,
great proportion, cut, posing ability was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just a good presence.
Yeah.
Smart guy, intelligent guy to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, in '69, when I entered the '69, Zane was backstage changing, and I said, "Frank, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, they want me to pose." I said, "Oh, great." I said, "But Frank, you're heavy, you're bigger." He says, "Oh yeah." He said, "I'm 12 pounds heavier." I said, "Well, I weigh exactly the same from last year. How?" He says, "John," he says, "the guys on the West Coast are taking this Dianabol. They're taking 3 or 4 a day, and they're good size." And that's when I really heard about the Dianabol.
Okay.
Now, Frank didn't say I took it. He said the guys on the West Coast are taking it.
Right.
But I had nothing but praise for Zane. His classic physique.
Yeah.
And I disagree with those guys. I think the mentality of some of those guys, they just want, like Larry's one of them. He's just big. He's not big enough. He's not big enough.
Right.
Larry's 370 pounds. He's a big guy.
Right.
So he looks at a guy and he wants him to be big.
Right.
But I won the America. When they announced that, John, on stage, all the Americas were on the right part of the stage and all the Universe was on the left.
Okay.
As soon as they announced that, guy comes up behind me, grabs me in a bear hug and picks me up and says, "Congratulations." And it was Arnold. I had never met anybody that was so enthusiastic and so effervescent. This guy was, the one guy in the room that's going to stand out.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. I was so tired. I was exhausted. And he was just so alive,
Right.
So
I was going to ask you about Arnold because I saw those pictures where you guys were standing on stage.
Yeah, that's my claim to fame is being with Arnold on stage.
Yeah, he was kissing the girl, kissing the
He kissed her before I did.
Yeah.
I said, Arnold's 7 years younger than me, and I said, he's about 4 years ahead of me, everything else.
That's funny.
So Arnold goes back to California to fame and fortune.
Right.
I moved to the mountains of Maryland into obscurity. I sold my club in Massachusetts, and I opened up, and I had a mother and daughter at my club, and they were from Hagerstown, Maryland. They said, John, go to our hometown. It's in the mountains of Maryland. They don't have any fitness centers. So I took a trip down, and it reminded me of New England, the mountains, and I've been here ever since.
Wow, no kidding. Really?
I opened the club, and I had it for 10 years, and that's where John Taylor came in and joined.
Yeah.
And I had another guy. John went on to win the Teenage Mr. USA. And in New England, I had a father bring his son to my club, and he said he's 14 years old. He's getting in trouble, and he shows an interest in this. And he said, I just think if I sign him up for 3 months, see if he can do anything with him. Well, he latched on to me like he was 14. At 16, I left. Was running a club in Quincy, Massachusetts, and I left that and opened my own in Framingham. One night, knock on the door, and there's Paul. He shows up. He's got a suitcase, and he says, I told my mother I was coming up to stay with you. Well, he started training, and I had him as the gopher. He'd go for this and go for that and kept the club clean. I sent him to driver's ed, and I took care of him like a son or a younger brother. And he won. He was the youngest Mr. New England. He at 17 years old.
Wow.
He won it.
Paul what?
Paul Tomasetti. He
Tomasetti.
went by the name of Paul Thomas at the time.
Okay.
And he won Juvenil's Mr. New England.
Yeah.
Holyoke.
Right.
And there were a lot of famous guys that came to that Holyoke throughout the years. Yeah. I mean, I remember Zane, Poole.
Frank was from Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
Where was Alan Keene from? Was he from that area too?
Massachusetts.
Okay.
Massachusetts.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Alan Keene beat Frank Zane, didn't he, at one point?
Yeah. At Holyoke.
At Holyoke. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frank was mad.
Yeah, I heard he was mad. Yeah. Hey, John, tell me about those dinners you used to go to with the Weiders. That had to be interesting. I mean, you're sitting there who were you sitting there with? Larry Scott and.
Yeah, there was a bunch of them, and I remember sitting there one time, and Oliva came in. And of course, when Oliva came in, a lot of noise,
Yeah.
He walked over to the table, John, and he comes over to me and puts his arms on my chest, around my neck and on my chest.
Yeah.
DeCola! DeCola! And I'm saying, I don't know, Sergio, except I did meet him at that 64 Mr. America contest.
Right.
Must remember,
Yeah.
So I felt important because Sergio came over to me.
Right. How did he look in that 64 America?
Oh, he looked great. He at 195, his waist was like 29.
Yeah.
You just picture him just a little smaller, but he had the shape, he had the proportions.
Yeah.
It looked like he didn't have any wrist. It looked like the forearm connected to the hand.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I talked to Boyer Coe, and Boyer, I think, competed with him at a junior Mr. America, and I think Sergio won that year. And he said they had the weightlifting first. So all the bodybuilders were kind of in the back, and they were playing around, and they had a rope, and they were climbing up the rope. And I guess Boyer could climb all the way to the top and back, and Sergio was impressed with that. But they said they somebody had a tape measure, so they measured Sergio's waist. It was the same size as one of his thighs.
Oh, it's incredible.
I know.
Oh, man.
And he said the same thing you did. He said he was a little bit lighter. He wasn't, as big as he became later on when he was Mr. Olympia. But he said his proportions were incredible. I mean, it was just amazing.
Well, I judged the 1970 Mr. America, Mr. Universe, Mr. Olympia.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah, they had the Mr. America back to judge.
Right. Okay.
And I'll tell you, John, I remember these things that stand out to me. When they were introducing the judges, Bud Parker was the MC.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to me and he said, this is the present Mr. America, John DeCola. He says, who I think was one of the nicest Mr. Americas we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shocked me,
Yeah.
But so I see Sergio and Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sergio beat Arnold in 68 and 69. Right? Even Zane beat Arnold in 68.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's a little bit smooth. Well,
yeah.
Arnold came back with vengeance. And the judges were having a really hard time trying to figure out the winner. That there's perfection in both.
Yeah.
Arnold wasn't quite as heavy as Sergio, but he had more cuts. And that's what beat Sergio. Arnold beat Sergio.
Sergio's a little smooth that night, right?
If you want to call it smooth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Harold Poole was a name. Harold Poole, before Sergio and Arnold, there was Poole and Scott.
Yeah.
That was a great competitive contest between those two.
Did you see those shows, John?
Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, when you had 3,000 people packed in there, and the balconies filled, and they would stomp on the floor, and the building vibrated. I had never seen heard anything like it.
Yeah.
And they treated us like rock stars.
Yeah.
They had 500 people out waiting for autographs afterwards.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
But Poole came out and posed for the Olympia.
Mm-hmm.
And now from North Hollywood, California, Larry Scott. And there was silence. I mean, the crowd erupted, but there was no Scott.
Yeah.
And he purposely stayed backstage, and he teased the audience.
Right.
He came out, they went crazy. I mean, it was like, well, Arnold took over that psychological warfare. He took over from Scott,
Yeah.
Yeah, and Arnold was noted for that, right?
Hey, speaking of that, did you see when Arnold sort of tricked Sergio into going off stage in 1970, and then he stayed on stage?
Yeah. Those games he played were amazing.
Right. Tell me about that. How did that work out? Like, what happened?
I remember the incident, but I can't remember the details.
Okay, yeah. Because from the story I heard was that Arnold said to Sergio on stage, "Hey, I'm beat. Let's get out of here." And Sergio exited the stage, and then the crowd started booing. So Arnold stopped, and he's like, "Come on back. Like Sergio quit."
When they had the pose downs, that's when it became really aggressive.
Yeah.
One would get in front of the other and bump them out of the way.
Really? Wow. Yeah.